think the word, or at least the term, Plastic Maori, trying to get my fingers in there, Plastic Maori is really starting to evolve in this whole digital social world that we live in. For a long time, it's been used as a derogatory term. The term plastic, meaning that it's inferior, it's fake, it's of lesser quality. So if you're plastic, then you're a fake. You're not as good as the non-plastic. All of those sorts of things. And I could type in Plastic Maori on Google right now, and there's an article that comes up from like 2011 that talks about this new term, Plastic Maori. So it's a term that's been around for a long, long time now and used in quite a derogatory sense. And there's a lot of, you'll see quite a bit of content out there, people making videos about, Plastic Maori is a made-up term. It's not something that you need to worry about. The only thing that qualifies you as being Maori is your whakapapa, which makes sense. That's perfect. It's plain and simple. It's factual. There's no space for this Plastic Maori term. But what I kind of see online and in the digital space, especially with Snapchat and Instagram stories and TikTok, where there's a lot more opportunities for people to express themselves, the term Plastic Maori, from what I can see anyway, is almost being taken up as like a term of endearment. It's become a word that people can use to connect with, and not just connect with the word, but connect with other people. And I was thinking, like, in terms of, if you thought of it in terms of a scale, like at one end you've got, really high. Well, look, there's two things on the scale. One is knowledge, and two is the practice of that knowledge. Practicing the knowledge, the execution of the knowledge. So at one end you've got people that are very knowledgeable and practice what they preach. They're practitioners in their fields. They know a lot about their own Māori identity. They know a lot about culture. They know a lot about te reo. They know a lot about whakapapa. They know a lot about different iwi and their connections. And they practice what they know. And at the other end of the scale, I guess, is the complete opposite. People that don't have that. And this is where the Plastic Maori have been banished to, down that end. If you're down that end of the scale, if you're not a real speaker, if you're not knowledgeable, if you don't practice your cultural knowledge, cultural beliefs, if you don't stand up for attacks on our culture, on our people, then you're a Plastic Maori. Whack! You get hit with the Plastic Maori stick. But I think the way it's evolved is that, like I referred to that article before, it's been around since, earlier than 2011. It's been around for a long time. And I think it's been around for so long now that the effect of it being a negative term is starting to wear off. It's kind of like the grenade getting thrown over the brick wall. The Plastic Maori grenade kept getting thrown over for so long, and it kept blowing up on the other side and affecting people and really diminishing people. But the grenade's going over now, and I think people are catching it. They're holding it, and they're almost throwing it back over, in a sense that it's now a term of endearment. It's a term that people can use as like to provide a subset of identity beneath being Māori. It's almost like a new demographic being carved out in that societal grouping of people. It's this demographic of I'm part of the Plastic Maori crew, and that's okay. I think that's what people are saying, that it's this acknowledgement and acceptance that, hey, I'm not at that end of the scale. I'm not incredibly knowledgeable, nor do I practice that knowledge because I don't have that knowledge. This acceptance of identity that's me, but also I am Māori. I whakapapa Māori. And I think that's really good. I think that's a good thing. I think that I don't think that Plastic Maori is the right term, because like I said before, it comes from this acknowledgement that plastic is typically, or this idea that plastic's fake. But I think it's good that there's at least a term, even though it's come from a negative history, there is a term that people can now connect with, where in their identity they're accepting that they don't know as much as they could, and that's okay. For whatever reason, whether they've been blissfully ignorant, they've been purposefully ignorant, they've grown up in an environment that didn't support that, all of those things. There's acceptance, and there's acceptance of self. Unfortunately, it's through that word, but at least there's some acceptance. Because I think there's enough trouble in the world today with people struggling with identity, especially young people. Man, they got it really, really tough. I do really, really feel for them, particularly with the pressure, the social pressures that come along with social media, and the issues that they have in social groupings, and that doesn't stop at the school gate. It follows you all the way home. It follows you into your bedroom. It follows you under the covers, all through this little device called a phone. And so at least that's one part of a solution to that identity issue, identity crisis, maybe we want to call it. That people are at least comfortable with using that term to define themselves. Because without that term, and without any other term, there really is there's no other word for it. There's just not a word for it. In sports, we think of a sportsman, the professionals in rugby league, for instance, the Andrew Johns, the Stacey Jones, the Jonathan Thurstons, they're the professionals in that field, in that body of knowledge, that world that they live in. Then you've got the semi-professionals, then you've got the amateurs, then you've got the rough dudes that just sit down at the pub screaming at the screen, counting their tab dockets. There's in the identity of being Māori, or any sort of, I guess, cultural identity, racial identity, there's no terms that define, not that I know of anyway, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you could let me know. There's no terms that define whether you're extremely knowledgeable, whether you don't know a lot, whether you're somewhere in between, whether you're like a third of the way along. It's really, really hard, because there's no real way of quantifying it. It's kind of a qualifying process. And the term Plastic Maori at least qualifies you somewhere along that scale. And it's at this end. And it's not to say that that's a bad thing, but, that's just where you are. You can change that position whether you want to or not. You don't have to. But at least you can find some sort of commonality. And from there, with that acceptance of self-identity, you can then start to connect with other people that you resonate with, that you're familiar with, people like you. That's why I go to a rugby club, to join people that have a common interest in rugby. That's why anyone goes to any sort of social group. So there's, they can connect with people that they feel safe with, that they get along with, that they have common thoughts, ideas, experiences. And so just to go back to what I said at the start about the term Plastic Maori is evolving, I think that's why it's evolved from being the negative connotation, the thing that bullies would throw over the grenade that the bullies would throw over the brick wall to do damage, and it's actually been taken up by the people that were meant to be being hurt by that term. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. Now, whether it should stay Plastic Maori, that's a story for another discussion. But I think the fact that those people that do sit at that level of knowledge and practice do have some term that they can connect with, I think that's a good thing. And if you want to verify this, just type in Plastic Maori into any of your social media accounts. You'll see the term come up a lot, and quite often, maybe not quite often, but there is quite a frequency that occurs of people just referring to themselves as that. And to me, I could be wrong, could be completely wrong in this 12-minute session, but I think people are starting to get some level of connectedness to that term in a positive way through the acceptance of their identity.